Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Saturday morning session. I appreciate your arrival here on time for our session, which is being live streamed to the National Opera Center in New York, where we have a symposium going on with our New York area producers. We are also live streaming to a national and international audience. You may or may not know that coincidentally, and we tried to avoid it but couldn't quite pull it off, Opera Europa is having its conference in Madrid this very weekend that we're here in Washington, D.C. And they are live streaming a number of sessions from the meeting in Madrid. We are live streaming a number of the sessions here from Washington. So people who are in neither venue can have a real international perspective, a global view of what's going on in the opera world. And all of these sessions will be archived on our YouTube channel. In New York, we have a meeting of about 30 of our New York area producers who are part of the New York Opera Alliance. They're having other breakout sessions and speakers, but we're delighted to be able to link our conference in New York with the National Opera Center and with our colleagues in Europe. So welcome all. In the course of the last couple of days, we've been talking about civic impact very much through the lens of impact. What can we do? This morning, we're going to take a closer look at what it means to be civic, what it means to be a community. We'll shift our focus from the concept of community in a relatively monolithic way to thinking about a community as a group of individuals and a group of individual relationships. We'll consider how we measure our impact to know that we're doing the right thing and doing it the right way. I took a look at some definitions that may help frame our thinking. Civic means of or relating to a city or town, especially its administration, a city or town. But an alternate definition, the second definition, of or relating to the duties or activities of individuals in their town, city or local. So it's not only place, but it's individuals. We're going to be hearing from Jason Schupak from the NEA, so I looked up placemaking. Placemaking is a multifaceted approach to the planning, design, and management of public spaces, capitalizing on a local community's assets, inspiration, and potential, with the intention of creating public spaces that promote people's health, happiness, and well-being. The word community, a group of people living in the same place, or a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. And certainly I think it's that second definition of community that is our objective. That we're not just seeking to define our towns through opera, but we are seeking to create this sense of fellowship with people who share our interest in the arts, who share our interest in opera, and making our communities richer through this art form. We'll look at some concepts that we know the language of, but do we really know what the words mean? Things like social cohesion, livability, quality of life. Our next speaker, Ilir Zerka, is the Executive Director of the National Conference on Citizenship. And these are very much the terms that he deals with, that he looks at, that he attempts to measure in leading our country toward a better place for all the citizens who enliven our lives. So, Ilir, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. You know, I have some personal experience with how the arts connects people to each other and to community. I came here when I was about 2.5 years old with my parents, my siblings, and my grandparents. We lived in the Bronx, in some tough neighborhoods. And most of the kids I knew at age 16, unfortunately, never actually graduated from high school. But my experience was different. And part of the reason why my experience was different was in the 10th grade, I met a English teacher. Her name was B. Ferraro. And I really enjoyed her class. In the 11th grade, I took her drama class. And through her drama class, I got involved in the school plays, and I actually had a few parts where I sang. Nothing close to opera. But, and then I joined the improv club. And together with that class, the English class, we went down into Manhattan, where we saw Broadway shows and went to the Lincoln Theater, the Lincoln Center. And those experiences, combined with other things that we did in other classes, really helped me to connect to other students, to administrators, to my community, and to find myself, and I think that's most important, and to find a passion in life. And that passion ultimately became trying to strengthen what we call civic life in America, and that's our mission at NCOC. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. What civic life is, how we measure it, and how we can strengthen it. So in practice, civic life looks like neighbors helping each other, people joining community groups, and Americans engaging their government. We focus on turning data into action at NCOC, and we do this through multiple initiatives. Today I want to talk to you about two interlinked topics: civic health and attachment to place. Starting off with civic health. In 2006, NCOC began tracking America's civic health through our civic health initiatives. We convened a working group made up of several leading civic thinkers, developed measurable indicators, and shortly thereafter launched the first civic health index. That index measures the following things: volunteering, social connectedness, political action, trust and confidence in institutions, and community involvement. And by collecting this data, we're trying to show a strong connection between civic health that's important and not just a nicety, but a necessity. And I think that that's part of what you all are trying to do here together as well. Seeing the value of this effort, Congress in 2009 incorporated the Civic Health Index in the Serve America Act. The legislation directed NCOC and the Corporation for National Community Service and the U.S. Census Bureau to expand the National Civic Health Assessment. Today, this data is collected through the civic, volunteering, and voting supplements of the Current Population Survey. The question is, what does that survey tell us? What's the information that we get? Well, the evidence shows that there's a strong connection between civic health and stronger individuals, safer, healthier communities, and a more responsive government. So let's take a look at each one of these just a little bit. At the individual level, we know that people who are engaged civically are healthier, that when families hold regular dinners together, reading scores go up, binge drinking goes down. Additionally, civic engagement tackles feelings of isolation and connects people to each other. We know from a report that CNCS put out a number of years ago, people who are unemployed and volunteer are close to 30% more likely to find a job as a result of that volunteer relationship. We know that when people are engaged, that neighborhoods are stronger, that inequality goes down, robbery rates are actually lower in communities where there's higher civic health, and people's fear and anxiety goes down as well. When people are engaged with their government, governments tend to be much more responsive, and we know from studies that stronger organizations in communities with higher levels of civic health are better able to make wise but difficult policy decisions. And we know that our neighbors, when they know and treat each other well, are less likely to be polarized, and that's true also in our government. In terms of our economic health, we conducted a number of studies in 2011 and 2012 that showed that the top 10 states that had high levels of social cohesion and nonprofit density experienced the economic recession very differently than the bottom 10 states. And in fact, those top 10 states had unemployment levels a little bit over 6%, starting around 4.5, but a little bit over 6% at the height of the Great Recession, but the bottom 10 states, even though they started around the same place, had unemployment levels over 10%. And those correlations between civic health and unemployment were very, very strong. So obviously, civic health matters a great deal. Let's talk a little bit about what's collected. In 2012 and 2013, the supplements I talked about earlier interviewed between 30,000 and 60,000 households, and they tell a story of America that, while not alarming yet, gives us pause at NCOC. 16 of the top 20 indicators went down during that period. 88% of family dinners were held frequently compared to 90%. 76% of people heard from family and friends frequently compared to 79%. 56% reported trusting most or all their neighbors compared to 57%. 12% reported doing favors for neighbors frequently compared to 14%. And that trust of neighbors and doing favors for neighbors is critical, right? Because that's the essence of how we get to know each other and how we help each other. Group participation went down as well, 36% versus 39%. 10% were officers or committee members compared to 11%. And we saw some similar numbers with volunteering. 1 in 4 adults volunteered, about 62 million Americans, giving about 7.7 billion hours of their time, valued at $173 billion. 138 Americans engaged in informal volunteering. And while these numbers are high, and to me very impressive, they still represent a downward trend over the last few years, where we were at about 27% a number of years ago and down to about 25% now. So the question then, I think, for all of us, certainly at NCOC, and I think for you as well, is how do we improve this? Well, the data shows that attachment to place leads to greater civic health. Attachment is something that's special. It transcends satisfaction, loyalty, and even passion. The Knight Foundation has done some great work in this area. Together with Gallup, they produced something called the Soul of the Community a number of years ago. It's a landmark study of what drives attachment. And the top 3 drivers of attachment are social offerings, which include arts and cultural opportunities. And if you think about arts and cultural opportunities and social offerings, these are the places where we gather, right? Where we meet, where we might share an experience watching an opera or a play or a concert, where we meet people and we exchange information. Maybe we'll learn something about a school. Maybe we'll find a babysitter. Maybe we'll find a job as a result of going out. A second component of attachment is openness. How open are we as a community to diverse ideas and diverse set of people? The third is aesthetics. How much physical beauty, either built or natural, does our community have? And these 3 things, social offerings, openness, and aesthetics, have higher correlations for attachment rates than do things like education, basic services, leadership, the economy, safety. Let me say that again. Social offerings, openness, and aesthetics combined have a higher correlation with attachment to place than do other major indicators that I think if you ask the average person, they would say, well, you know, the economy or how safe we feel, or even our educational institutions are more important. In fact, that's not what we see, and that's not what the data shows. So attachment really matters. It leads to stronger community pride, leads to a positive outlook on a community's future, and a sense that a place is perfect in some way. People, as a result, are less likely to want to leave a place where there's high levels of attachment. The local GDP is higher where attachment occurs. So attachment and civic health go hand in hand. The question is, what do we do to improve attachment and civic health. And I've seen by looking at some of your honorees and some of the amazing work that you all do that we have some very innovative programs. People creating mobile operas, for example, in Cincinnati, and culturally inclusive opera in Chicago's Latino communities. And these efforts matter a great deal because they connect people to each other, they strengthen what we call civic life, they strengthen our civic health, and they provide us opportunities to meet, to connect, and to strengthen our communities. So with that, let me thank you again for your kind introduction to join you here, and look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Ilir, thank you so much for that really interesting construct. I made note the importance of attachment to place, as you say, leading to greater civic health, and social offerings, openness to diversity of ideas or people, and aesthetics, which is the strong suit of the arts community, of course. These are deliverables that we offer up. Has the arts community been a part of your work heretofore, or is this a first entry, a first foray of the arts into this work?
This is, in some ways, a first entry and foray. We did, a number of years ago, challenge designers and technologists to come up with ways to present this data in something we call the Civic Data Challenge. And we had some art communities come together to try to define that connection and illustrate it through video. And that was very inspiring. But we look forward to the possibility of working more closely together because, as you said, social offerings provide really that glue that leads to strong connections and strong civic health.
When you think of your work at the National Conference and you view the arts, do you see the arts as having barriers around good citizenship? Are there preconceived notions about the arts community, or is it just at this point an untapped opportunity?
You know, I think it's an untapped opportunity. One of the things that we work against is the notion that all of these things are just nice, right? That volunteering is nice. It's nice that people volunteer. And that it's nice that people donate, and you know, maybe it's even important. But I don't know that Americans, or even and in some ways this may be even more important, our policymakers understand that these things are essential. They're really essential to the life of our community, as is the arts, right? I shared with you all the story of my upbringing, and you know, we had lots of police on the streets of the Bronx, and I don't know that any police officer was able to help me connect with my community in the way that my English teacher was. And so if you're thinking about how do you help a group of kids that at the time were called at-risk kids, now we call them opportunity youth, how do you, yeah, great opportunities there for growth. How do you connect, you know, kids who are struggling? And for me and many of my peers, it was either the arts or sports or both. Mm-hmm. And I think making those connections are hugely important. We try to make those connections, but you all are the best ambassadors for really driving home those connections with illustrations of the wonderful work that you are doing.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm going to turn to David Frere from Arts Midwest. And David gave a wonderful presentation a couple of months ago at the Wallace Foundation. And in a way, what we're doing here is, what Ilir suggests, is an institutional role of ways that we can improve civic life, engagement in community, attachment to place. But David's research, which he'll explain, looks at it through the individual lens. What do individuals value in their lives? And how, from what we learn about individual objectives for self-realization, how can we meet them halfway to improve their lives through the arts? So, David, let's turn to you. David Frere.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Ilir, too. This is, as we were sitting there, I think both Jason and I were kind of like going through our little remarks and saying, okay, yeah, he already said that. Which is good, because that means that there's resonance, I think, with some of the points that we're going to be dealing with. My goal here today is to introduce you to work that Arts Midwest has been involved with over the past 2 years regarding the development of a national movement to build public will for arts and culture. A project that has a great deal of resonance, obviously, with the theme of this session, Civic Health, the Intersection of Opera and Society, and your conference theme of increasing civic impact. And as I will explain, while building public will has a great deal of synchronicity with increasing civic impact, there are subtle yet significant differences between the two strategies. It's my belief, though, that effective intersection and progression in both approaches, by having that, our field will be stronger, more inclusive, and better positioned for vitality in the coming decades. To begin this conversation, I thought it would be helpful for me, because I wasn't here for the last 2 days, to consider what you've been discussing during that time. Just for fun, in our office, we developed this word cloud pulled from the session descriptions of your program book. Thankfully and appropriately, you've placed opera at the center of your work. Bravo for that. But core to your discussions have also been themes around community engagement, civic impact, audiences, trust, sharing, family, and exploration. All of these terms speak to a field in the process of reconsidering its relationship to its community and its audiences, which is healthy, and I applaud. Increasing civic impact is, for me, also tied to work that Arts Midwest has been involved with really over the last 14 years around the discussion of creating public value. We began work around creating public value in about 2001. And so before I go into the discussion of building public will, I think it's important to discuss public value. When we talk about creating public value, the term creating public value was originally coined by Harvard professor Mark Moore, whose book outlines how public sector managers, that is, the administrators, commissioners, directors, etc., who lead government agencies, provide public services and distribute public funding among other activities, how these public managers can rethink their role in the policy ecosystem. Moore suggests that in order to understand and create value for their agencies, public managers must shift from a traditional role of being passive implementers who simply facilitate the distribution of public resources to meet organizational goals and fulfill operations into a more active role in which they use imagination and innovation to influence organizational goals and fulfill operations and drive conversations and change at the policy level. How does that kind of thinking relate to the arts? Between 2001 and 2005, with support from the Wallace Foundation, Arts Midwest engaged Professor Moore in applying this theory to the work of state arts agencies and the arts community. Here we took the concept from the broader public service model and applied it to the programs and services of state arts agencies. Historically, most of these agencies perceived their primary constituency to be the arts organizations and the artists which they funded. In fact, through the creating public value process, they began to understand that their constituency was in fact the broader community, and that arts organizations and artists were vital and critical partners in the process of delivering public value to that broader community. Thus, while continuing to nurture and support the arts infrastructure to every extent possible, thereby ensuring healthy partners, it eventually became an expectation of public funders that these same arts organizations embrace, understand, and demonstrate their value to their constituencies. In effect, there was a growing emphasis on increasing civic impact. This approach has been hugely helpful for many state agencies and organizations across the arts sector in re-envisioning their position in their communities and shaping new expectations about their involvement in policy decisions. It has also made those institutions more accountable to their constituents, requiring active engagement with and response to shifting community demographics. And it has provided a communication platform for organizations to demonstrate to their authorizing environment, that is, policymakers, appropriators, and other funders, how well they are addressing the widespread needs of the community. And yet, at a certain level, creating public value or even increasing civic impact is still a bit of an inside-out approach. While organizations successful in creating and communicating their public value are often both responsive to community needs and active contributors to local vitality, the messages they are sending may still be based on their own internal perception of the value they bring to society. And while policymakers and appropriators might concur with their value perceptions, there is little evidence that the broader public will find resonance with those messages. For all of our work in creating and demonstrating public value, the arts continue to struggle in broad public terms. As we all know, the most recent report on arts participation to emerge from the NEA sets a grim outlook for engagement with the benchmark arts, those institutions that offer jazz, classical music, opera, plays, ballet, and visual arts exhibitions. Here, researchers found that only 33% of Americans attended a benchmark activity in 2012, compared with 39% a decade earlier. While engagement with other types of arts activities rose during this period, 71% of Americans used electronic media to watch or listen to art or music, and 44% created, practiced, performed, edited, or remixed their own art. The trend away from attending formal performing and visual arts activities is troubling for the future of our field. Public funding for the arts isn't faring much better. When taken at face value, raw data suggests that we've witnessed a 19% increase in public funding for the arts over the past 20 years. But when adjusted for inflation, these levels actually reflect a 30% decrease. These realities often put the arts on the defensive, repeatedly expected to prove relevancy during budget and policy negotiations, suffering from declining participation rates, and often perceived as a low priority for busy lives or tight household budgets. In short, the arts are perceived, again, as Ilir says, as a nicety rather than a necessity. This nicety perception has lingered in spite of considerable efforts to shift expectations around arts and culture. We have witnessed many advocacy initiatives over the years, some successful, others not, that employ high-cost marketing tactics focused on assuring the public that the arts are essential to education, a critical part of our nation's heritage, a driver of urban and rural development, or that they help us become better human beings. It hasn't been quite enough. Each of the advocacy arguments may be true, and many initiatives have achieved at least partial or short-term success in preserving public investment in the arts, even at a diminished level. But our successes tend not to last or to translate well into future victories. We believe this failure is rooted in a focus on short-term wins, that is, passing an initiative or defeating a budget reduction, rather than on achieving long-term shifts in normative expectations around arts and culture. Our use of messages that resonate well with existing arts patrons, cultural workers, and audiences, but which fail to connect to or motivate the broader public. And further, our reliance on arguments that focus on delivering facts or data, especially economic impact data, which rarely influence attitudes or behaviors on their own, and which frankly are not unique to our sector. Faced with this frustration, several years ago, Arts Midwest began to explore other approaches to broadening public support for the arts. Our exploration led us to the Metropolitan Group and to the theory of building public will, an approach grounded in the notion that policy agendas are influenced by what the public thinks, cares about, and what the public values. An effective public will movement requires listening to that public to understand its desires and behaviors. To those ends, a building public will approach uses a combination of extensive research, messaging, media, and grassroots engagement strategies to understand existing public values and then communicate the connection between those values and the targeted issue area. Unlike traditional advocacy strategies, which often tend to motivate a one-time change in attitudes or behavior, building public will campaigns seek to create lasting change. When applied by other industries, this approach has catalyzed shifts in community expectations around smoke-free public spaces, improved water quality, hybrid vehicles, organic foods, and more. The shift around these industries was achieved by connecting people to an issue through their existing closely held values, increasing the likelihood that they will adopt a new attitude, a new understanding, or a new behavior that is sustainable over time. Tactically, this model integrates grassroots outreach with traditional mass media tools to communicate a compelling narrative and call to action, a call to action delivered by authentic messengers whom people trust. The approach leads to a deeper public understanding and ownership and creates a new and lasting community and new norms for that community that shape the way people think. Realizing the potential for this approach on advancing the state of the field and with the support of a broad array of funders, we embarked on a multi-year project with Metropolitan Group to build public will for arts and culture. As with any public will movement, we first set out to understand what the public truly values and to use those findings to draw connections between their values and the potential benefits of engaging in arts and cultural experience. Our goal in the endeavor is not small. It is ultimately to make arts and culture a more recognized, valued, and expected part of everyday life across America. To begin our work, we undertook an intensive research process that included a thorough literature review, of prior research, a national public survey of values, priorities, and behaviors, and a series of more than 24 focus groups and conversations held in communities across the country. And we uncovered the following core findings about public values and their intersection with arts and culture. This is going to sound familiar again. First, creating connection. Creating connection is a key motivator driving personal behaviors for most Americans. Connecting with family and friends is the dominant, closely held value and decision driver for the public, and it is the value most clearly associated with the achievement of our goal. Connecting with ourselves and connecting with others via opportunities to experience and learn from different people and cultures are also important to many people in our survey and focus group. Second, the phase creative expression is a much more effective message frame than arts and culture for entering into this dialogue with most people. We found that the term creative expression was more successful in motivating the public to take action, to recognize value, and expect opportunities for the arts to be present in their lives. Here, people define creative expression broadly to include everything from problem solving to artistic inspiration, expression, and traditional concepts of the arts. Just to clarify, and this is important, we are not recommending a wholesale abandonment of the word art or culture from all messaging, marketing materials, or even brands in the field. For example, I am not going to go back home to Minneapolis and change the name of Arts Midwest to Creative Expression Midwest. Neither do we intend to undermine the contributions of professional artists by dumbing down the field and equating their practice with amateurs or hobbyists. Rather, we are suggesting that the use of creative expression invites more people into the conversation and is therefore a strong entry point for diverse audiences that may not have an immediate resonance with the phrase arts and culture. Third, am I third? Yes, good. Third, the perceived benefits of engaging in or experiencing creative expression are very personal and very real to the broader public. Research participants talked openly about the benefits of engaging with creative expression, often describing those benefits in literal physical terms. For example, creative expression or engaging with creative expression reduces stress. It helps me unwind. It makes me happy. Those are things that people care about. Fourth, while not necessarily congruent with audience attendance patterns, we learned that people under 30, women, parents of younger children, and people of color are in fact key audiences for whom engagement with creative expression is a priority. Existing core audiences, including baby boomers and arts enthusiasts that we see filling our concert halls, venues, and museums, are certainly important pathway messengers for a public will building project. But to be successful at building public will, we need an effort that focuses on more than just those existing audiences. This will not broaden the support for our group. Here I've thrown in just a few slides to give you some statistical points. I think you can see them here, but the first one is an age-related demographic slide. I would look down to, let's just say, the bottom, listening to, creating, or sharing music. Under 30 and 30 to 39, both very high. You get up above 65, it becomes much less of a priority in people's lives. If you want to keep going on that one, look at gender. Women are much more likely to engage in any of these creative expression activities than men, or want to have more opportunities to do so. By race, again, you see some really striking data points here, and I think very important data points. And again, remember how we entered the conversation. We entered the conversation through a discussion of creative expression, not by asking people, what do you think about the arts? What do you think about opera? What do you think about music? But really, what do you think about creative expression in its broadest frame? And then continued the dialogue and found that the pathway took us back into the traditional arts as well. By parental status. Shifting back to our findings, the last theme to emerge from our research was that barriers to increasing engagement with creative expression and arts activities are considerable, but not insurmountable. For most people, arts and culture are perceived as a luxury rather than an essential aspect of everyday life. This is related to perceptions that the arts are expensive and that it's difficult to find the time to engage. While these aren't necessarily new findings, I witnessed back to the RAND report from 2000, what we did uncover in our research was that audiences are finding their experiences at arts institutions to be too passive. Certainly, there are many of us who still enjoy the opportunity to experience arts and cultural programs from the quiet of a gallery seat or a seat in the theater, but others are looking for more opportunities to engage differently and actively in experiencing or creating art. When individuals don't find such opportunities at Benchmark or other kinds of arts organizations, it reinforces the perception that arts and culture are not relevant to their lives. These 5 core findings help shape a strategic message framework, which at its most fundamental level communicates a core understanding about creative expression being a critical vehicle to connect with the people we care about and to connect with ourselves. Our message framework is intended to serve as the strategic underpinning for all messaging around advancing creative expression as a recognized value and expected part of everyday life. It is not intended for use verbatim with external audiences. Rather, it's the foundation on which external messages will be built moving forward. As we move forward with the project out of the research phase and into a new phase of engaging with the sector, connecting with influencers for our priority audiences, and launching traditional and social media strategies, we will use this framework to craft new messages that reflect the identified values, articulate benefits to specific audiences, and communicate the core concept of connection. Let's look at the message frame. First, the core message itself. Connection. Sharing creative experiences and expressing our own creativity helps us connect with others and ourselves. This serves as the foundation of our narrative and will be incorporated into all aspects of the communication for the project as we move forward. If our audiences and stakeholders remember nothing else from the program, they should remember and relate to this core message. Next, all of our messaging and communication will incorporate words, metaphors, and imagery that resonate with the core values expressed and held closely by the American populations that we surveyed. The values of family and relationships, health and well-being, and learning and self-improvement. Each of these were deeply held, and were also values which had a direct perceived linkage from the public to creative expression. There's a believability factor here. Folks believe that they will get this. When we ask them, do you believe that your community will be economically stronger because of creative expression or a presence of the arts? It was on the bottom. So a policymaker might believe that. A general citizen really doesn't. Lastly, our framework will communicate the perceived benefits that our prioritized audiences and stakeholders value with regard to their creative, artistic, and cultural experiences and activities. Again, these are believable benefits. Creative expression will help me express my unique talents and ideas or those of others, provides outlets for creativity, helps me find balance, it connects with the self, reduces stress, helps us understand and appreciate other people, perspectives, and cultures. So, what's next? What are we doing with this framework? In the coming 2 years, we anticipate launching an intensive outreach, messaging, and engagement initiative that will develop and disseminate this framework and build grassroots support for arts and culture. Here we will build on our existing research as well as the complementary yet separate advocacy, marketing, and audience development efforts taking place in the field. We will also harness knowledge beyond our sector, connecting with stakeholders who are not traditional arts advocates or allies, and we will create and launch messages, tools, grassroots engagement strategy. We will work with unusual suspects as messengers to ensure that our efforts do not simply preach to the choir, and that we're using appropriate pathways to carry our messages to new audiences. Our activities will include creating support materials and toolkits for the field to use in print and online platforms that help communicate the relationship between your work and these core public values of connecting through creative expression. We will be conducting further analysis of our priority audiences to identify their influencers, and we will be offering training and technical assistance for arts institutions and influencers on how to apply the message framework. We will use targeted media placement strategies to begin to shift the narrative around the arts. These efforts will not include massive formal ad placements, but rather we will use multiple earned traditional and social strategies to disseminate the messaging to our primary audiences. Our work in this phase and throughout the project serves to strengthen the entire field, including opera, dance, jazz, presenting, and theater communities. We are hoping to be able to provide you with these proven messages and strategies that will demonstrate the connection between your offerings and existing public values. In this regard, we see you as both beneficiaries of, as well as core partners in our project, benefiting as you accrue value from increased public openness toward and support for your work. So, returning back to the beginning and finishing up, public will and public value, public will and civic impact. Creating public value or increasing civic impact produces meaningful and important benefits for our communities and the people who live in them. It strengthens the reputation of the organizations providing the benefits, especially among policymakers, funders, appropriators, and the media. It may also increase the link between the public directly benefiting and the organization providing the impact. That said, it may not always result in a broadly based recognition of the critical importance of arts and cultural organizations in society. Building public will, which is initiated through a process of intense and engaged listening and learning about closely held values of the public, provides a platform upon which our field can potentially strengthen and deepen its relationship. Based on listening, we craft new, refined, authentic messages to the public, and we also refine our programs to embrace the values and benefits that the public seeks. Many of these programmatic refinements may already be underway through the work that you're doing to increase your civic impact. Others may require further thought, evolution, and continued listening. When the process is successful, that is, when our values and behaviors are aligned with the closely held values and behaviors of our communities, broad publics will begin to expect, recognize, and value arts and culture in their everyday lives. For us, then, public will and creating public value or increasing civic impact are not, as Jane Chu would say, either or options, but in her words, both and. When we have both of these strategies in play, when we're in a cycle of listening, evolving, and messaging, we will have nurtured an environment in which policymakers, philanthropists, community leaders, and the media will recognize that there has been a tectonic shift in public expectation around art and culture, and they will see that these expectations are not one-offs, but a lasting change in the way that arts and culture are recognized, valued, and expected in everyday life. Thank you.
David, thank you so much, and for all the great research that you've done, which I think informs our work in important ways. Early on in your presentation, you referenced that you think we have, in certain fashion, been approaching this material inside out, that we have been focused on an internal view of our own assets, a kind of product focus. What's the other side, inside out? What do you want to see us turn the other face?
I think that thanks, Mark. I think that the other side, I think the other flip on this is to come at it from the lens or through the lens of the values that people have and that we have been studying and learning more and more about. When I think about the inside out approach, it really to me speaks to things like we have had a tendency in our community, I think, to find an argument that we think is effective, that we have a profound impact. The kids who study music will, in fact, get better test scores. And so that may be true. It very well is probably true. But we take that argument and then we use that argument to hammer, hammer, hammer. And the fact of the matter is that the general public either A, doesn't believe it, or B, it's not what's motivating them to care about us. We should be looking at what is in fact motivating them to care about what we do and what we have and embracing that. We're afraid of being fun. We're afraid of being some of the other points that were up there, of in fact offering that connection, of offering that meaningful return.
In some of the findings, I'm curious about what you imagine the implications for an arts organization to be. The notion of creative expression feels participatory to me. And opera companies don't traditionally have a large participatory opportunity. It is, although audience members get to interrupt with applause and bravos and occasional boos, that our audience is relatively participatory compared to other art forms, but still we don't have art making at the core of what we do. So what do you see as the implication for an established arts institution? I
think that there's actually an opportunity, and I think many of the examples that I've already heard discussed, or that you and I have discussed, of opera companies that are in fact engaging with their audiences in different ways, taking the work into different venues, taking the work into different communities, doing the work in the schools that Chairman Chu mentioned earlier. Those kinds of opportunities open a door and a bridge to allowing a public, allowing an audience to in fact see the pathway in. Not every single event has to embrace that form of activity. But I think the issue is, how can we open that pathway so that people can either find a way to nurture their own creative expression or understand the beauty of the creative expression? I've talked, for instance, with colleagues at Theater Communications Group about this. The highest growth area for attendance at theater programming in TCG's annual survey among their benchmark theaters is participation at staged readings or open rehearsals. Because people can, in fact, come in, everything else is going down. Those activities are up 20, 30 points. People can come in and actually see something being made, see the creative process, and that's where that creative expression component comes back in. I think it's a little bit of creativity.
Mm-hmm. You also, in the research, point out that the phrase arts and culture that carries implications that don't motivate people to be supportive as citizens. What are the barriers to that phrase, arts and culture?
I sat in on several of the focus groups. And the focus groups were, I mean, they were well managed, well recruited. They were very diverse. And the barrier that came back was art is about somebody else. It's about judgment. Somebody else is judging, this is good, this is bad. It's not me. It's about somebody else's expression or experience. I don't feel connected to it. I don't feel that I belong. There were just a lot of those kinds of immediate woes that stopped people from participating. And it's a very perceptual, visceral response. You know, you go back to the RAND research, and they always said that the barriers were both practical and perceptual. And the practical barriers can be overcome. The perceptual barriers are much more challenging to engage with. But our theory is that by approaching the perceptual barriers through a pathway that's rooted into people's values, we can actually begin to overcome those barriers.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we will hear from our great friend and colleague, Jason Schupat from the NEA. Jason has been at the forefront of thinking about creative placemaking, a term that many of you will have heard. He's also been bold in thinking about redefining and expanding the definition of placemaking, which heretofore has been very limited in a way to the visual arts and installations and specific about locality. Here, the creative process, in a way, what David is talking about, creative expression, is part of placemaking as well, opening up the potential for the performing arts to find a safe harbor in this concept. So, Jason, tell us about your work at the NEA about placemaking and your new understandings of it.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Wow, total silence. Woo! Let's try that again. That was weak. Good morning, everyone. All right. So I'm here from the federal government, and I'm here to help. Again, I had to thank Alir because he totally stole my shtick. So I usually start this speech by saying, why do you think people love living in a place? Because I'm using the night soul of the community data that he showed. And I speak to a lot of non-arts audiences about this work, and almost everyone answers with these, what you would expect answers, right? Oh, they live there for their job, they live there for the environment. But because you all know, the number one was social offerings, openness, and aesthetics, which we believe very strongly are tied to the arts. So in most of those conversations, and in a lot of the folks that I talk to that are actually working on making places better, the power structures that have the money, it's always, this is what we're focusing on, and this is our little arts project over here, right? And it's just how it goes. And what we're really trying to do is to bring the arts into that structure and into those power structures. So I always say to folks, there's no silver bullet to making a place great. It really takes 100 different tools you have to work on at once. So if you care about making places better from any perspective, you need to understand what the tools are. And 10 to 15 of those tools are arts-based tools. And I'll say right now, not very many people out there understand them. As we all know, they're not necessarily rocket science. I mean, I don't consider myself a nuclear engineer. But they're not well understood. So we have a lot of work to do to educate people about not only what our value is, and I appreciate the work that you guys have done to educate people about the value, but also really how to do the work, right? They don't necessarily know how to work with us. So we made up a term, yay, everybody loves new made up terms, creative placemaking. We'll call it creative placekeeping because Roberto's here in the front row. Really, that's just, really that's what I said before. What we define that as is bringing the arts to the community development table. So what can creative placemaking do? Well, I think you'll see yourself in many of these things I have up here. It's about strengthening, the knee jerk is everybody thinks it's about creative economy and strengthening economic development, but it's not just that. It really is about that openness, that social offerings, and aesthetics, seeding civic engagement, one of the most important things that we performing arts organizations can do, building the resiliency, the social resilience of a community. Did you see the social resilience of Baltimore after those riots the next day? That was because the social structures were strong, right? That they were rebuilding their community so quickly. And obviously, what's life without the arts? It contributes to the quality of life. And really, how can it do it? I'm going to show you a bunch of examples, so I won't dwell on this slide. I hate when people read off slides. But it's really about helping to anchor community, make people feel, provide those kind of community identities and institutions, activating a community. That's one of the things you guys do best. Fixing, which is a loaded term, reimagining the use of public spaces, beautifying, this is sort of the aesthetics thing, and planning. Really, you can engage community stakeholders through the arts in interesting ways. So how did we pursue this, right? Everybody remembers Rocco, right? When Rocco came in, he had sort of a three-pronged strategy about how we were going to pursue supporting creative placemaking from the federal government. The first thing he said is, well, maybe we can get Congress to help us spend some of our money. And that became the Our Town program, which I'm going to show lots of examples from. The other strategy he had, which I thought was actually pretty incredible, was partnerships. Other people's money, right? Who here knows the astronomical size of the NEA's budget as compared to HUD? I would say like our budget is a little, tiny speck on my finger, and most other agencies are like the size of this room. So we needed other people's money. So we started working with other federal agencies. That's been a very iterative process. There hasn't been like money for opera companies that's come out of the Office of Housing and Development. But there's been a lot of different projects, and you can come and grab my card and I can talk to you about them, where we've worked very closely with other federal agencies to get arts constituencies into these other large planning and community-based projects. The second piece of what he went for was foundation money. And I think everybody's heard of Art Place America. Show of hands, yes. Super hard to get their money. They grant 2% of the people that apply. It's sort of ridiculous. But this is 14 major foundations and 6 agencies working together to support this kind of work out in communities. So let's talk a little bit about what Our Town and what's happening. I think this will begin to land what some of this work looks like now, and how communities are beginning to think about how to engage the arts in different ways. So what was different about Our Town? The only real different thing that we're funding in Our Town, we're funding everything that you could possibly fund in Our Town. We have funded in our agency for 50 years. What was different about this fund was that we required a partnership between local governments and arts organizations. A lot of people really hated this, and it was a guess that this might work, that some of these conversations might work. And we were really blown away by the way that communities stepped up and started working together. We got a lot of arts organizations calling us and going, who do we talk to? And we got a lot of planning offices and mayor's offices calling, going, all these arts organizations are calling us. Why are they doing that? And we're like, because they're your constituency. Maybe you should work with them, So that was a success in our mind. So we've given 256 grants all across the country, all 50 states. We've obviously got some blank spots, but everywhere from, that's an Eskimo village on the Bering Strait up there. They can literally see Alaska from their house. Washington, D.C. joke. All the way up to the Acadian portion of Maine, down to the tip of Florida there, and Hawaii. So everywhere, all different kinds of communities. I think our smallest town is a town of 12 people in Colorado, Last Chance, Colorado. It's not their last chance. This is the interesting part to me. So just on last year's grants, we had 374 partners on 66 grants. Who here thinks it's hard to do partnerships, right? So that means there was an average of 15 partners on a grant. 15 partners on a project. 151 of those were arts folks. Who was it? All different kinds of folks. As you can see, the largest actually were performing arts, multidisciplinary and presenting organizations. Music and opera, obviously, I'd like to see more of you guys applying. But every different art form. These were the other folks on the grants. This is super exciting to us and blew us away. This is everybody out in your community. They want to work with you. This is success to us, right? So a lot of people really, we didn't make the very good case when we first started talking about these grants about why we thought it was important to the arts community, because we never really finished the sentence. We said, yes, arts are important to community development. The second half of the sentence is, so that there are now more community organizations, institutions, individuals that care about the arts, right? We're trying to build those conversations to get people out of their silos, not just the arts, but other folks out of their silos, working together to make their communities better. So what are the project types? People are obsessed with public art in the country, but as you can see the next two down, it really is a multidisciplinary different kinds of projects that are happening. So let's look at some projects. Who's been to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania? Anybody? What's it famous for? Steel. No longer open, right? This is the famous old steel stacks factory. Half of it is a Sands casino. The other half is now a multidisciplinary arts center. So they have a performing arts. This is a Levitt Pavilion out front. Facing that Levitt Pavilion, they have a new jazz and performing arts center and film center. And we funded this sort of capstone piece, which is a 20-foot high steel piece of public art that lights on fire. Who would like to try to get a piece of public art that lights on fire approved through a public process? You know, not easy. And up the sides of it are written all the names of the buildings that were built with steel from Bethlehem Steel, including the Statue of Liberty and Empire State Building. Incredible project, and they light up the steel stacks there at night, sort of post-industrial Red Rocks. Your company should go perform there. Nashville Opera Association, where's my friend Noah? Here he is. He was our first lead opera organization who got an Our Town grant. We're really thrilled about it. So go talk to this guy. He's really smart. He knows Nashville and said, we have so much talent in this town, so many songwriting talent. Every country song is an opera, right? A little mini opera. And we want to bring that talent into the opera. Opera is a living, breathing art form. And so he's going to run a competition for people to write mini operettas, and they're going to go perform them all around town and in some of the country music honky-tonks, right? You could only do that in Nashville because that's that place, right? It's very true and honest to that place. Great idea. Loved it. This is a project in Milwaukee. This is an interesting project where it's the Milwaukee Ballet, a school of public health, and a school of sports medicine, and a school of the arts, all going into the same facility together, right? Have you noticing these are all kind of like arts and public health, arts and place. This is an incredible project, though. This is for my cultural facility nerds, because this is on a public park, will be a public deck. It is on the site of a public parking deck that's going to be torn down. And what they're going to do is put the public parking in the bottom of the building, and they're going to offer the money from the made on the parking deck as a permanent subsidy to the Milwaukee Ballet from the city side. Boom. We also fund and like to, who's here is actually also an artist in your life? I'm also an artist. I was a music nerd, classical music nerd. This is a project where the Arts Incubator of the Rockies, where it's an online system that's trying to train artists about how to build their business, do business development. This is a great project in the Wisconsin Dells area of Wisconsin called from our friends at Worm Farm. They are artists working with farmers to try to help farmers make more money. So the farmers said, we really need people, these are small farms, not big industrial farms. So we need people to come out to our farms and spend money on our farms during the time of year. So they hold this thing called a fermentation fest where they sell beer. We did not fund that. And pickles and all kinds of stuff. But during that time, they also do big pieces of public art out on the farms themselves. So that's actually not a theater group. That's a Mennonite family. It's just a cool photo. Love that. Those are rad outfits, by the way. But they are, so during that 2 weeks, people go out to the farms and see the pieces of public art. There's also performances out on the farms. I don't have the picture from this year. There is an opera company that worked with them this last year from Chicago, and there's a picture of an opera singer in a cornhusk dress and a big piano up on a tractor. It's really cool. This is an interesting project, just to show you one public art project to give you some perspective. Has anybody been to the Baltimore Visionary Art Museum? You know that big whirly gig that's outside? That guy, Valasan, he passed away last year, was 92 years old. He was an outsider artist. He developed these are about, that one in the middle is 200 feet tall, these whirly gigs that spin in the wind. And the town wants to move them into the, let's see if I can get this, into the downtown. They're restoring them and moving into the downtown. That's not the most interesting part of this project, so yes, it'll be a tourist site. the most interesting part of it is they actually said we have an enormous number of people who are unemployed who used to be machinists, and we want to teach them folk art restoration skills. And now they're in conversations with the Smithsonian to create a permanent folk art restoration center in the old tobacco warehouse right there. You see it right there. We'll see if it happens. We'll see. Don't clap. It hasn't happened yet. So, but you know, that's a really interesting way of looking at putting the arts into a different kind of picture and perspective in community development. I just wanted to share this slide because we're also data nerds and we support these kinds of projects. This is a Culture Blocks project in Philadelphia, which maps different kinds of data together to help look at where the arts are invested with different kind of data. So this slide here is National Endowment for the Arts grants at investment with ethnic diversity status. So the purple areas are the ethnically diverse parts of Philadelphia, and the green dots are NEA grants. We're not doing so great, right? Now there's probably many, many reasons for that, but this informs us in a way that is very incredibly useful to our agency. So you can see more of these kind of projects online in a database we created called Exploring Our Town. You can sort through the projects. You can sort them by festivals and performances and actually see these kind. And we also have, for you guys, some one-on-one primers, lessons from the project managers, these sort of insights from the project managers about how to do this work. There's a great report that Roberto, I just keep calling on him because he's so good at this, under the section called Understanding Community, that's really about how you truly go and engage the community in a very meaningful way, and that what you're doing is not just sort of a surface engagement. And I also want to mention, we'll be releasing, I can't show it because it won't be out for a couple weeks, a report from a convening we did about the performing arts in place, which Mark was at and some other folks. Well, we talked a lot about what is the role of performing arts in places. The Houston Grand Opera there was there. And one of the key lessons I think I heard that day was that a performance is not a placemaking strategy, right? The performance itself is not the strategy. It's everything you do before the performance, and it's everything you do after, right? Because a performance is just one moment in time. But it's all of those different steps you take to engage the community before and after that are the things that really, truly matter. So to keep an eye out for that for when we release it. It's got an executive summary you can read quickly. And that's about it for me. I'll jump down now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to Alir in a second because I saw him nodding throughout your presentation. I want to connect those points. You use some language that I just wanted to explore a little bit. The idea of surface engagement. And what do you mean, what does surface engagement look like to you?
Did I say that?
Yes.
I think we all have experience, everyone here has experience with stumbling and bumbling through truly engaging a community. And I think it's very difficult to do that in the right way. I was a huge fan of Parks and Recreation, that TV show, being a government nerd, and you know the community meetings they showed there are just so real, you know. And I think that as we all have to look at how are we going to adjust to the changing demographics in the country, us being 4 white guys up here, we're going to have to figure out different ways to meet people where they're at. And so, engagement is an art form in itself. We don't have to, you didn't study that in school. You can engage experts in that in a way to help you. So surfaced to me is when you you had your meeting and people maybe came and maybe you had a translator there. But you didn't really do the really hard work to go meet with community leaders and truly engage them in a way that makes sense. And I'll just put a fine point on how hard this is. So we did a session. We do these sort of rural design sessions, and we did one in a very small town down in Mississippi. The town is 40% African American. How many African Americans do you think came to the actual group session? 1, right? 1 over 2 days. So I kind of had to read them the riot act, and there was this African American guy there who was one of the experts in community engagement. And I was like, well, they didn't go talk to the churches. They didn't go talk to the city councilmen who are obviously African American. He said, stop right there. You're knee-jerking with the most obvious thing, and you're insulting me. Because you're talking about just going to the leadership who are always engaged. You're not talking about actually going to the people. He's like, what you really needed to do was to have a barbecue down in their neighborhood in a time of day when people actually could come. Have some music that would draw people out of their houses, go door to door and get people to really truly come out and meet with you. He's like, you got to take that extra step. It's that hard. And that just showed to me, no matter how many race sensitivity classes I go to where I'm, realize what I don't know, you still always don't know enough. It's something that's just going to continue to be really, really hard. So, I encourage everybody to just continue to work on that. Work on it with yourself first, right? Because I thought I was pretty good at it, I've been doing this 15 years, and I was like, whoa, clearly I'm not.
You also use the phrase true and honest to a place.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I think I was trying to sort of get to what Roberto was talking about, which is the one great thing about artists is that they're something that every community has, right? They're a naturally occurring resource in places. And they're our reflection of the true culture of that place. And I think every place has its own, I'm going to stumble and bumble through this, excuse me. I think you know it when you go it and see it, what the honest culture of a place is. That's why we all love New Orleans. And I think that projects need to really, truly reflect those local assets, reflect those long time-honored traditions in many places. And for places that don't have long time-honored traditions, we do have a lot of very new suburbs and things like that. It's about helping people see that for themselves and help them discover that for themselves.
Ilir, I saw you nodding affirmatively as you were listening to both presentations, especially some of Jason's remarks. What were you affirming with that nod?
Well, first of all, the NEA is doing fantastic work, don't you think? Let's give them a round of applause. So in thinking about their two presentations, what really struck me is Jason was talking about tearing down silos, right? And trying to build connections between folks who are in the arts and others who may not see themselves as in the arts, as ways to connect people to each other in spaces that found it fascinating, the idea that ballet companies going into a space with others. And the importance of that is huge. And then David talked about meeting people where they are in terms of how people are already thinking about creative expression and the value to them. In answer to a question that you had, David talked about doing more than just your performances, right? I think for all of us who care about the work we do, obviously you have to do that work, but there's more that you have to do in order to connect to communities and get people invested in that work. So sometimes it means going into the schools, sometimes it means going into farms and performing, other times it means enabling people to do those things that you're doing on stage. And that piece is really important, the ownership piece. I talked earlier about how civic engagement strengthens communities and makes them more economically viable. One of the things we saw in our reports is that membership in an organization is important, but actually a particular type of membership is the most important. And it's the type of membership where you have a voice and a vote, and you're not just sending in a check and you're a member. Those type of groups where membership is real and the membership has a voice and engagement is hugely important. So whether it's a religious institution or a sports or a cultural institution, that kind of ownership is hugely important. I think that kind of ownership is important within the arts too. And thinking about my own, transformation as a teenager, it didn't really happen when I was watching someone perform. It happened when I got up on a stage and I performed myself.
How do you know? We saw in some of your slides, Ilir, how you measure healthy communities, about volunteering, about engaging. This work for an arts organization is completely, not completely, but at this depth is new to us. And we have traditional means for understanding whether we're doing well or not. How are ticket sales? What were the reviews like? What are the subscription renewal rates? We don't have any feedback mechanism for whether in our communities we're doing the right thing or doing it the right way. Yeah. How do you measure?
How do we measure?
The success of programs that help build community.
So, I think ultimately you have to think about those key measurements that are important to you, right? So I think both Jason and David presented possibilities that go beyond ticket sales, right? And thinking about what those things are, I think is a challenge, but also allows some level of creativity. Obviously, you want to be able to follow up with people. But when I think about, we have an annual conference. Part of what we measure is connections that people make, not just were you happy with the sessions that you listened in on. Like, did you make connections? And then to the extent that we can, we try to follow up with those people. How do those connections matter for you? And I don't know whether something like that would be possible, but social offerings provide those opportunities for people not to only enjoy the performance, but to meet new people, right? To go have coffee with those people or dinner or maybe even date and get married. So if you think about those, as results, right, as an impact, then you're thinking much more expansively. How you collect that information, I think, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that it's critical for the arts community to start thinking this way, especially given the challenges that we're all having across all sectors in terms of public financing and also, stagnant wages among most Americans.
Jason?
Sure. I mean, let me just start by saying, creative placemaking is not for every arts organization. It is something that works for people, some organizations and some not. And measuring actual community impacts is hard, but everything can be measured. But I always start with somebody said this to me once and it's always stuck with me. Measure what you value and people will value what you measure, right? What are you actually trying to achieve? Attempt to actually measure that and not everything on the planet, right? Measure what you're actually trying to accomplish. And then, since I'm your funder who gave you the money to do that, I'm actually going to value the fact that you measured that. The secret to measurement is really having a professional evaluator help you. I mean, there are people who are trained in this, right? Like, you would never try to go be your own accountant when you finally become adult and get off TurboTax, right? Still haven't done that myself, so shouldn't be tisk-tisking people. But there are professional evaluators who know how to do this. It's very important to have an evaluator on board early in a project to help you identify what you should measure as you go through it and not at the very end. So there are lots of, for folks who can't raise the money or it costs $10,000, $20,000 to have an evaluator. There are social science schools nearby that might be able to assist you. There's the Evaluators Professional Society of America that has 5,000 members that meets in DC. So if you feel like that is something you need to do, and we are not at the agency saying right now that you need to do a professional evaluation of a placemaking project, because our grants are only $20,000, like, we want you to do the art. Think about it and, and engage a professional is kind of what I say. Because it's different in every situation. There's no one size fits all.
We noticed in one of your charts that your applications from music and opera organizations are fairly small in number. Yeah. Why do you think there is this perceptual barrier or barrier of practice between creative placemaking and music and opera organizations?
I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. That doesn't mean that performing arts are not in music and opera companies are not participating in these multidisciplinary projects in interesting ways. They're just not the leads, right? Mm-hmm. They're not the folks that are going to they're not the primary partner going to the government and saying, we want to be the partner doing the project with you. There's lots of them working on the projects themselves, mm-hmm. and that was just 1 year of data. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's the kind of, we need to have more conversations like this. Maybe it's those organizations haven't been successful in convincing the mayor that this is the one project they should send in versus other projects. I honestly do not know. I wish I had a better answer. I think we explored a lot of the issues in the report itself of the challenges that some performing arts organizations face in doing this kind of community-based work and also just doing the work they need to do. So stay tuned for that when that comes out.
David referenced Mark Moore's work, and in fact, on the Ohio Arts Council website, you have this wonderful question: what is public value? And it defines that the value yielded to citizens in the public sector is not simply defined. In the public sector, value revolves around important collective purposes such as health, safety, education, cultural preservation, economic development, civic engagement, quality of life. Just a wonderful set of concepts to hold in mind as we think about the projects, and not only the projects that we might undertake, but the fundamental value of our opera companies in their communities and how much more we can deliver beyond the inspiration of that performance itself in the Opera House. We are out of time with our wonderful panelists, but I know that, first of all, David is going to do a follow-up presentation in this next break called a Spotlight session on the research that's been done by Arts Midwest. It's very, very interesting. Jason has invited you to come down, get his card if you'd like, and chat about some of the programs at the NEA. And I know that Ilir will be here to chat with you some more about how he's working in this wonderful space. So please join me in thanking our panelists, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.